From Informa Tech Target, I'm David Essex, and this is Enterprise Apps Unpacked. Organizations are struggling with how to implement artificial intelligence on a big enough scale so it adds measurable value and lives up to its potential to transform how they do business. Often their actual AI use is decentralized, with employees finding their own AI tools and preferring to use them instead of officially sanctioned AI. Corporate-sponsored AI projects tend to be limited to small pilots. Many companies don't yet have a comprehensive plan, and hard technical problems like coordinating the activities of AI agents are taking a lot of mental energy and resources right now. Consulting firms and system integrators are responding to these challenges by offering to help clients move beyond these scattershot pilots and design and execute a coherent, scalable AI strategy. We've covered the topic in previous podcasts, but today's guest, Jim Dwyer, has some advice I hadn't heard before. Identify one high-impact AI use case and execute it well before moving forward. He speaks from experience as Chief Transformation and Innovation Officer at Sutherland, a business process outsourcing and IT consulting firm with more than 40,000 employees. He focuses on AI-led process transformation and has more than 20 years of experience in management consulting and digital transformation, much of it for the healthcare industry. In the podcast, Jim explains why this particular strategy works, how to identify the use case, what it takes to execute it well, and then how to apply the lessons in other projects and in the broader AI strategy. We also discuss where companies tend to go wrong in using AI for digital transformation and some keys to success. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to Enterprise Apps Unpacked for the real story on the software that runs your business. Well, Jim, thanks very much for coming on the podcast today.
Great to be here. Thank you, David. Looking forward to it.
So you're involved in a lot of AI-based strategies, but the one that really intrigued me, there's probably many, but the one that really stuck out at me is the idea that organizations should try to move beyond just doing a bunch of pilots and focus instead on executing one high-impact AI use case and doing it well before moving forward. So my questions are, to start, why do you advocate that particular strategy and what's the advantage of it?
Well, a few things. I think we almost have to start with something we're starting to see, which is AI fatigue is becoming real. And certainly there are those that would say it's overhyped, and I think many of us would say it's still underhyped. But at the end of the day, it is a fatigue in the boardroom. We advocate a pilot because a pilot proves the model can work. When you get multiple pilots out there and they prove it can work, that's great. You've proved the technology can work, but you need that use case, that high impact use case, so you can drive it down to business value. And we think of this as preventing AI sprawl. Certainly in a lot of our clients, we used to talk about shadow IT. AI has made this a whole new kind of problem. And by getting to that high impact use case, you're bringing all of the focus into one thing. You're focusing the leadership, the funding, the data access, the change management, and you're trying to say, let's do this one, prove its value, and then extrapolate into the others. Otherwise, we get that old portfolio effect of we have 120 projects all in flight, but where's the business value? And I'm thinking of the C-suite here that are looking at it going, we have this fatigue. We keep hearing about it. We keep hearing what it can do. Show me in the P&L where the impact is. And that's why we advocate for pick that one high impact use case, prove it, document everything you do, and then move on to the others.
So what steps should people take in the first place to identify what that one use case even should be?
Yeah, you see me leaning back. This one gets, we're going to get a little bit into the art now. I think of it, and we think of it, not where can I use it, but where will it create business value? So the best use case that we have found in our clients is there a high operational friction? Is there clear economic value? And I'm going to come back to that one. And then a readiness to change the workflow. So we start with that business pain, not the technology, if you will. I said I'd come back to that high operational friction and clear economic value. When we used to do large scale implementations, ERPs, medical records in hospitals, I ran a few of those. There was always a question we would start with. What is success and how will we measure it? And so when we're thinking about identifying that use case, it is not so much what can we do, but what can we do and measure that value downstream. The best AI use cases, they're usually hiding in plain sight. They've got a lot of operational friction. They've got broken workflows. Certainly as we go on the rest of this, I'll start to talk about process redesign and how AI enables that. But it's really that high friction, multi-compartmentalized, multi-department problem. And can I redesign the process, measure the value, and really establish that traceability to a metric? And that becomes your use case. You have to have that. What is success? How will I measure it?
So are those the primary characteristics of this high impact use case, or are there some other characteristics that people should look for so they can help them identify the one they're going to go with?
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit to the left here, so humor me. I was trying to explain what goes on in a chief transformation officer's mind in our clients. And the only way I could think to explain it, I was sitting here in my office and I used an analogy called the window and the mirror. And in the mirror, I'm looking at how can I apply AI to fix my processes, do things internally. The classic examples here, usually in finance and accounting. Can I close the books faster? Can I put better BI tools in there? That's in the mirror. I'm doing things to make my company run more efficiently. The other side is out the window. What can I do to create new products, to create a new experience with my product, to remove friction for my customers? Those are all out in the market, out in the window. So to answer your question, as you're looking at this, I look at it as in many ways you're on a balance beam because you have 10 projects in here, in the mirror, to make us more operationally efficient and competitive. But then I've got 20 projects out here that are how do I respond to the market, the competitors, what my clients are asking. So what is the right use case? It depends on the client. Are they a client that is in a highly defensive position in the marketplace and needs to focus more out the window? Or are they in a place where they really need some efficiencies to be competitive? Then it's going to be more in the mirror. At the end of the day, it could be one or the other. Going back to your previous question, how do you get that one use case? Which one creates the most value for where that company is and where their strategy is? But I like that window and mirror framing as a way to kind of say we can go left or right. Some would argue, what about a project that hits both? That's a whole other podcast.
I think that's a pretty good metaphor. That works for me. When you said you were going to go left, I wasn't sure where you were going, but that actually works pretty well. So once you identify the AI use case, there's this little matter of execution, actually doing it. So there's all sorts of questions I could think of, but the one I do want to ask is, where do companies typically blow it in the execution phase when they're trying to do this one AI use case well?
Yeah, where they blow it. It's interesting. People often think it's a technology failure. They say the model can't perform. That's not really the case we've found. It's not a technology problem. They fail because the organization hasn't redesigned the workflow. So, if we go back in time and we think of the old classic BPR, business process redesign, it was all about fix the process and then we would apply the technology. I think with AI, we've gotten a little lazy and we've just said, well, let's just automate that process without saying, is that process the right way to do it? So I would say failure point one is a failure to look at the process and say, can we do this in a better way? Once it's redesigned, then treat AI not as a tech deployment, but as an operating model redesign. This brings it back to the metric. I know success. I know how to measure it. Every decision I make is about improving that metric, not applying the latest foundation model or the latest thing that I can do, but doing what I should do to drive to that metric. Where else they fail it? I'd be reticent if I didn't say data readiness crops up everywhere. We've got these great models. We've got these great ideas. We've got the metric. Then all of a sudden we're stuck at, well, is the data ready to support it? Can we integrate to the data to support it? And what kind of process variation might we have? So I think data readiness is one we tend to skim over, and it comes back to bite us. Clear ownership. When I was talking about that CTO on the balance beam, they should not be alone. The CEO should be on that balance beam with them. The CFO should be on that balance beam. The chief people officer should be on that balance beam. It's about having that executive alignment and clear leadership ownership of the initiative. I kind of think of it as the mistake is assuming AI transformation is a model deployment program. I'm rolling out Claude or the latest model at GPT. It's not. It's an op model redesign. And so I think companies fail when they think of it too much as a technology deployment and not as an operational redesign.
Mm-hmm. So to put the same question about execution in a more positive view, what approaches to execution have you found to be most effective?
Yes, we do need to talk positive here. I don't want to sound negative. We think of it as a closed loop between that outcome and the decisions we're making in deployment. So when we're looking and saying, what is success and how do we define it? That becomes the North Star. We're driving to that metric, but that needs to be a closed loop. Every decision I'm making on the process redesign and how I'm going to put AI in that digital backbone is always going back to that key metric. What are we trying to drive? I'm staying within the silo, I would explain here, of that one use case. As we talk AI deployment at an enterprise, slightly different. But within that use case, I'm driving to the metric. I'm measuring it continuously. And my execution succeeds when the AI is not treated as a project launch or even as a project itself, but as an ongoing operational model. So I would say execution most effective when you start to think of this as a continuous improvement cycle and not as a project. So I know I said a use case driving to this metric. It doesn't stop there. When you hit the metric, you go back around and you do the whole thing again. It is really a perpetual innovation loop, or for the more technically thinking, it's just an evergreen agile. It's just one sprint after another sprint after another sprint. And anytime anyone doesn't agree with me on that, I just say, well, 3 years ago, think what we were doing with AI versus what we're doing with it today. And 3 years from now, who knows? All I do know is that change has become perpetual.
It really has.
So most effective when you think of it is it doesn't just start and end. It goes on forever.
Right. So you might have partially answered my next question, but I guess I'll still ask it. If you have this single high impact use case that succeeds, it seems like, and I think you said this, it does have more potential to serve as a model for the next AI-driven projects. So what do companies or other organizations need to do to make sure that the learning and the experience they've gotten actually get used and preserved and carried forward into the future projects?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that we try and design into that use case. You're trying to do that first one that yields impact and document everything that you do. You're documenting your technology, your process learning. You're getting into governance, which gets back to that leadership alignment. You're trying to design all of that in. So when you go to the next one, you're not just starting with a blank sheet of paper. You're starting with, okay, let's start with what is success? How do we measure it for project 2? What are the processes that we have in place today, just like we did last time? Let's redesign those processes. What is our data readiness? What is our governance? What is our trust and safety? We start to get to the second and third one. We start to get into trust, safety, and far more of how is the human in the loop here. So the difference between that first use case and the second, I think of as extrapolation, do we have a trust infrastructure that's coming across, governance that's coming across? And is the change management, the people management, and that human-centric design and human in the loop, are they folded into each successive one? An example of that, we had a client that did a beautiful project, redesigned some quality control. It was a life sciences company, and we helped them redesign their quality control processes. Fantastic, working great. When we went to go to the next one, we carried forward the process playbooks and everything else, But what was missing was we hadn't taken into account enough of the change management and the human impact of what we were doing. And so the big learning in the second and third ones were people are people. They are human. They have emotions. This scares them in many cases. It excites them and scares them. We need to put far more planning into that up front of what that's going to mean. And in the first one, we were just so metric driven. I know I'm arguing against myself here a little bit, David. We were so metric driven that we weren't thinking enough about that. So when you go from one to the next, you've documented the playbook, if you will, process redesign, data readiness, governance. I really think of second, third, fourth is getting into the change management and really how am I starting to morph the culture of the organization.
So speaking of the organization, I'm assuming that Sutherland itself uses AI internally in your own operations. And so in that context, I'm curious, I guess, how do you use it? But also, have you applied this particular strategy of a single high-impact AI use case inside Sutherland?
We most certainly have. And it might be within Sutherland that I first came up with the mirrors and windows. We started with the mirror and really looked on how can we apply it to a lot of our core business processes with the goal of really, it wasn't so much cost takeout for us, it was speed. Can we do this faster? Can we do this faster? Can we do this faster? And we applied it across a lot of our supporting functions, human resources, FP&A, financial and accounting, and really looked at how can we do these better, faster, more accurately. So inside of Sutherland, I would say we started exactly as we would advocate with our clients. Let's pick one. Let's prove we can do it. Let's document everything we've done. Let's do a lesson learned after that, and then go to the next one and apply that same discipline. And so that's something that inside of Sutherland is absolutely a continuous process.
I don't know if this is privileged information, but can you say what the particular one was, or maybe the first one? Maybe you did, and I was listening, but I wasn't sure if it was the main case study use case.
I used our people's side of it. What's one I could share? I could share this one. We looked at AI and said, we measure employee satisfaction around the globe. And that's a lot of employees in a lot of geographies. And traditionally, when you measure ESAT, employee satisfaction, you're getting metrics and you're tracking the numbers and you're tracking them against last year and you're tracking across all these fields. How satisfied are you with leadership, communication from leadership, things like that. But inside also was the free-form text, the comments. And when you're doing this across tens of thousands of employees, it's hard for any one person to go into that text and see if there's a pattern. And so we use the AI tools to say, let's look at all of that text in conjunction with the scores, all de-identified. We're not tracking, be clear, completely de-identified. But what we were looking for were patterns. Could we look at the free form text and see if there were patterns in the data we were missing, things we could do better for our employees? And we did find a couple things that didn't show up in the metrics. If you look just at the numbers, you would say, everything's great in this area, in this function, to the employees. You got into the comments and you saw some things that we could actually improve that didn't come through in a static data.
That does seem like the kind of thing where, again, computers can do it. It would have been tedious. It might have been interesting, but a person would have, or two people or whatever, would have had to read all those and then confer and try to spot the patterns. And pattern recognition is one of the great things that computers and especially AI are good at.
Perfectly said. And, as I advocate, it's all about what is success? How do we measure it? Employee retention. We have phenomenal people. We want to keep them. We want them to love their jobs. So how can we make their environment and their positions better? So we actually had a metric that we could track. Now, you can't just say one-to-one, this tool led to this result, but it was a contribution to it, and we could see the impact. And so that's one I can share. We use it pretty extensively, David.
So what kinds of help does Sutherland provide to its clients? And especially, you probably do all sorts of AI transformation advice, but in carrying out this particular strategy that we've been talking about, what kinds of help do you provide to help?
If I had to say in a sentence, I would say it's we help get our clients from an AI possibility to AI production. And when we go into clients and they're like, we've got 10 pilots. Okay, to my eye, that's 10 possibilities. They're pilots. You're proving it could add value. That's a possibility. Production is saying, let's formalize this. Let's build the real digital backbone, redesign the processes, tie it to a metric. So it's about getting in the client and back to my windows and mirrors, helping them select the right use case is one of the first things. Helping them align and saying, do you have everybody on board? This is the use case. This is what we're going to do. We have a very large advisory practice, redesign the processes. I know it's what we've been doing for the last 30 years, but my goodness, the new technology is giving us new ideas on redesigning things. So redesign it and then build that digital backbone and enable it, run it, and keep that as a continuous loop to drive value to the clients. I think of it as we help our clients with the hard middle. At the top, here's what I could do. And then here at the bottom is something I read about that someone's using for AI. Why am I not doing it? There's a hard middle that says, in my organization, how do I deploy this? And it's that middle that's getting the right use case, getting the right frameworks and the right mindset, and putting that kind of design thinking in place so it becomes repeatable. And so everything I was talking about, pick the use case, execute the use case, get to 2 and 3, that's what we help our clients with. I think of it as pragmatic transformation. I haven't seen that defined anywhere in any literature or anything, but to me, it's transforming with an end in mind, not just, wow, look at what I can do. It's look what we have done, the value it created. Now here's the next 3 things we want to go do. To me, that's evergreen, pragmatic transformation. When we get with our clients, they often don't have all the skills to bring to bear on that. And when we look at that problem, you might have, someone like me going, how does this tie to the P&L? But then you'll have the data and analytics team going, well, what is the state of the data? You'll have the consulting and advisory teams going, well, let me document this process and see how we could change it. Of course, our digital engineering team saying, what do we need to build? How do we build it? How do we make it very flexible? And then we also have design labs that are looking at it going, okay, let's look at the human here, the customer and the associate. How is this going to impact them? Let's get some human-centric design into the flavor we're doing. That's a big table. And I think of the power that we bring to our clients is we can fill each of those chairs alongside with them. And if they don't have someone in that chair, we can fill it and then help them build that capability inside their own organization. I think that's what success is here, really.
Now, you have years of experience leading digital transformation initiatives, and I would say it goes back to before people were talking about AI, or maybe the first time they were talking about AI and expert systems and all that stuff that didn't do so well. But now, as you mentioned, you advocate a pragmatic approach to AI-driven, or just, I guess, all digital transformation. And as we've been saying here, it seems like AI in its currently popular forms, and I know machine learning is behind everything, but before we got generative AI, a lot of the specific tools were machine learning or presented that way. And then generative came along with the language capability, and now agentic. And then it's often a combination of the 3. But it still seems at risk, as we've been saying, of being too small scale, and is that in a lot of organizations, to really be transformative. But it also seems like AI could be the thing that might make even some previously unsuccessful digital transformations live up to their promise. So my question here is, what do organizations tend to get wrong when they try to use AI to either start a digital transformation, a true one that's, crosses departmental boundaries, has a big impact, or even jumpstart an existing one?
Well, a few things. I think if you put the technology in the lead, you're implicitly going with, this is a technology initiative. So first and foremost, we don't think of it that way. It is a great tool. And I think most of us would argue the best tool we've seen in our career. But at the end of the day, it's a tool. And that tool is an enabling function for what you're trying to do strategically, not the function in and of itself. So I think companies that start with, we are going to do an AI transformation, are implicitly limiting themselves to a technology project around getting a foundation model to improve something in their business. Same goal, but from the other side of the table is I want to improve this function and automate it so that David can call and report his auto claim, have it processed, and within 60 seconds have his auto claim settled. That's great service. So it's starting with, what are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to create as an outcome? And then using the AI to enable it. I could invert that and say, oh, I'm going to take this LLM and I'm going to teach it to process David's auto claims better than any model's ever done. Okay, but if I do it that way, I've created this phenomenal LLM. I've created an asset, but now I've got an asset that hasn't met the market. So they're really the same path. I look at it as, what is the lens you put on the path? It is a digital transformation using every tool in the toolbox. I like that one. It's an AI transformation. We will use AI, absolutely, because we've never had tools like this, but we may want to use other things like process redesign. Or, well, that one's a hard leap for me to make, to say I'd go back to machine learning on some things, but there are other things. The last point I'd make on that, what we know today against what we knew 3 years ago. I think we needed to transform how we did business 3 years ago. We used the best tools we had. We need to transform how we do things today using the best tools we have. I don't know what 3 years looks like. And putting my organization in a box of AI-led digital transformation, as opposed to just digital transformation, I'm taking away some of the flexibility for what I don't know. I had a client, a CEO, who said, my strategic planning group brought me a 5-year strategic plan. And I said, yeah. And he said, I threw it in the garbage. I said, tell me what the next 12 months look like. And we'll revisit that in 3 months. And so what we're seeing in boardrooms is this increasing pace. And I think the key to success for them is transformation, capital T first. And that we think of, that's what we're talking about, transformation, but really executed at a lowercase t, driving value, driving the value, driving the value. This fall, we get a whole new set of tools. Somebody does something for one of their IPOs that we haven't even imagined yet. We're going to apply it. And so that's keeping it in that lowercase t of driving value as opposed to AI-led, I think is the key for execution. Now, marketing is marketing. I'm talking execution here.
Yeah. Well, Jim, I really appreciate your coming on the podcast and having this interesting discussion today.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, David. This was great.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to Enterprise Apps Unpacked, where we give the real story on the software that runs your business. To learn more about business applications, explore our content on searcherp.com. Find us on YouTube at our channel, Eye on Tech. Subscribe to our podcast to receive the latest episodes as they drop. And if you liked what you heard today, give us a rating and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. Until next time.
Podcast programming and promotion by Kelsey Waddell. Podcast production and quality oversight by Anne Steshu. Music supplied by DP via Getty Images. This is an Informa Tech Target production.